What's going on, Founder University? I have an amazing episode for us today. In this episode, I have a great conversation with the co-founder of OfferZen, which is the biggest talent marketplace for devs in South Africa. His name is Philip. He's been in it for a really long time, and he shares a ton of super interesting information, covering everything from his strategy of how he built a successful marketplace business, which is one of the hardest businesses in the world to build. He shares some amazing books and concepts from those books that you can take out and learn and apply to your own business. And the most interesting thing that I think he shared was an incredible brand building strategy and learning that he had through building OfferZen. And the secret was actually through t-shirts, which sounds crazy, but it's an amazing story. So I hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll speak soon. Good to be reconnected. Thanks for jumping on. I'm excited for the conversation today. I want to give a little context to people who are listening here, because you look at my business, Talently, and look at your business, OfferZen. On paper, we should be enemies. We're in the same space. We're going after similar talent pools and markets and stuff like that. But we've actually become friends, and we've actually done deals together. So excited to have you on as a sort of specialist in the talent space, but specifically South Africa. And you guys, and I'll sort of phrase it simply, you are the go-to marketplace for dev talent in South Africa. South African companies hiring devs, offshore companies hiring devs. You have all of them, and you make it very simple for companies to go and find and hire amazing dev talent in South Africa.
Great summary. All correct, except for the part where I'm CEO. I was CEO until recently, but no.
Oh, they kicked you out.
I kicked myself out.
Fair enough. No, it was a long time. Well, I guess from your side of it, and hopefully I summarized it well. Like OfferZen's been, how long have you been doing it for, or how long has it been?
We started the company in 2015, at the end of 2015. So it's coming up on
Amazing.
10 years.
And I guess from your side of it, I always like to hear from founders. Like, what was the starting story? How did it come to be? Were you scratching your own itch, or how did it even start?
Yeah, so prior to OfferZen, we had run a venture studio in South Africa, and we had built a lot of different companies. You know, everything from mobile payments to crypto to market research. Pretty much, across the whole spectrum. And we kind of were looking for just something we could really sink our teeth into, something which we both, my brother and I, who started OfferZen, cared a lot about. And this idea that we had all these really, really smart people in South Africa, but we didn't have a good way of connecting them to each other, to companies, and to the rest of the world. And so, that was kind of the main impetus.
Wow. And so this was part of the studio and one of the plenty of ideas you were working on?
I guess technically yes, but practically, I mean, people running the studio was 3 people. It was my brother, myself, and one finance guy. So it was very small. All the talent was within the ventures we had started. So like when we started focusing on OfferZen, there was no more venture studio for practical purposes.
Fair enough. I've always thought of the idea of a venture studio to be very sexy, right? You're working on a bunch of different ideas, and you're taking bets in different areas and working on a bunch of different things. Like, what was your take on running a venture studio and focus perspective? Because it could obviously pull you in a bunch of different directions. Like, what were the, I guess, pros and cons from doing that or working in that environment?
Yeah, so we were very early in the venture studio space, right? So they weren't a lot at the time, and as you said, it is very sexy. It sounds great, right? Why put all your eggs in one basket when you can put your eggs in 10 baskets? Look, I would say that is true. You have that advantage. I think you do miss out on a couple of things, which is why we eventually decided, hey, we want to start a company that we could run, which is your most successful companies kind of leave the nest, right? And then there's this very exciting thing which you put your heart and soul into for a little while, then essentially leaves, and they go on and do these amazing things. And yes, you can, I want to say, take some credit for the success there, but you're not day-to-day involved anymore, and you kind of get this FOMO. At least I got a bit of FOMO of wanting to, I want to be in the room making the decisions, doing the things, and you do that when it's very small. But as it gets larger, that's just not practical anymore, and it's across too many ventures, too many domains, and your decision-making ability just goes down, right? Or at least my decision-making ability. Maybe Elon Musk seems to be able to pull it off potentially, but I don't feel like I could. So I get a lot more satisfaction working on one thing than working on the sports portfolio.
It's surprising to hear, because you think someone from a venture studio background would be excited from the 0 to 1, and maybe you were thinking about the 0 to 1 and getting things off the ground, but obviously you've had almost 10 years at OfferZen. It sounds like now your sort of focus and mind shift is like sink your teeth into one thing, help it grow as big and as successful as possible instead of going from 0 to 1. But do you think that's a personality trait or a focus? Because everyone says like, hey, I'm a 0 to 1 guy. Hey, I'm a growth guy. Hey, I'm a big enterprise guy. Like, do you think you can evolve or you're sort of wired a certain way?
I definitely think you can evolve. So I think, I guess all the founders who scale their businesses have evolved. You know, you think of Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates or Brian Armstrong. You basically think of, those founder CEOs. They obviously evolved from nothing to building these massive companies. So I definitely think people can evolve. Obviously, you need a lot of support to evolve. You probably need coaching. You need, a strong board. You need a lot of things. There's a lot of, support structures in place, or you need to put them in place to get there. But I think that for me, I'm still a sucker for the 0 to 1. I like the do things that don't scale. That is that is what I love. But it's almost realizing that if you actually want to have an impact in the world, you need to take it further than that. It's not, you're not disrupting anything when you have a company that no matter how innovative it is, 20 people are using, or 10 businesses or whatever it is. That's not changing the world. It's maybe changing a couple of people's life, and that's cool. But it's not changing the world. And so if you want to have a bigger impact, you have to necessarily, get good at growing a business.
Yeah, it's I don't know why the public perception is like you have to sort of bucket yourself into I'm a 0 to 1 guy, I'm a growth guy, and I'm like an enterprise execution guy. But to your point, I think we're on the same wavelength. Is like you should and can evolve your skill set over time because your business needs different things. It's interesting. I think society likes to bucket people into certain personality traits and just give labels to people. But you're a perfect example of Zuckerberg or whatever in his college dorm room, and now he's whatever sitting on stage with Donald Trump in inaugurations. Like you have to evolve and change over time. That's how it works. You're never gonna your mother's garage forever.
Yeah, what I will say though is that I found that it's difficult to get employees to scale with an organization along those different journeys. I found, 0 to 1 employees don't necessarily make, 1 to 10, and definitely not 10 to 100. I mean, obviously you get exceptions, they evolve. And it's not that these people don't evolve. It's almost that they struggle to read the cues. There's so much that kind of changes when you go from we're default dead. We need to just get this thing off the ground. Do anything anything you can to acquire a customer. To the next day, the rules completely change, and there's now a different system in place. We've now raised, millions of dollars. Now it's a different game. Now scalability matters, and I think it's easier potentially as a founder because you're the one raising the capital. You're the one that has to, pitch a bunch of people and explain how this business is different. Whereas I think if you're just in the organization, you maybe don't get that feedback. And obviously, as a founder, you can speak to your team, you can do that. And some people do make it, but I find the majority of people really struggle with those transitions.
Yeah, I reminds me exactly of a situation I was in previously. I was previously part of a startup in Toronto called Turnstile, and we were acquired by Yelp, which is a huge San Francisco publicly traded company. And when we were at Turnstile, it was free for all. There was no rules. You could do whatever you want. It's a 30-person company. We were acquired. We all went to Vegas, had a good party and celebrated. And then we all woke up on Monday and we were Yelp employees, where there was process and there was red tape and there was procedures and there was like hierarchy. And in the first probably 2 months, 6 months, half the company at Turnstile left and just said, this isn't for me. This isn't my structure. And half of us stayed, and there's a few people who are still there like 8 years later, but I think a lot of us just didn't meld with that environment or took whatever information we could from Yelp and learnings and processes and went from there. But yeah, it's different as a founder because it's your baby compared to being an employee, but definitely different personality trait. And so going back to, which I think is a good transition, which I always like to speak to other founders about, because you have that mindset of running a studio, an idea studio. Are there any ideas that you worked on in the past or any ideas that you sort of think of now that sort of keep you up at night that you're excited about, or ones that maybe you worked on in the past you're maybe too early for that you think someone should run with or you'd love to see in the world?
I'm very excited for my wife's company. I don't know if I'm allowed to if I'm allowed to say that.
I like that. A family plug.
Yeah, she's still pretty early stage. Her company is called Mindjoy, and what they do is they basically do AI, sort of AI-ified education for K-12 and higher education. And I want to say there's there's sort of my dream kind of product to some degree, which is just enabling people to to maximize their own personal learning, which, I'm a very big, learner. I try to be. I read a huge amount. And I've always wanted something that can just take that to the next level, right? So, for example, I'm learning Spanish. I'm not great at Spanish, but the idea of, okay, cool. Well, how can I take that to the next level? How can I make a course that's personalized for me? And AI is perfect for this, right? AI is the answer to this thing, and they're solving that problem, and they have real results. They actually increase the performance of
No
students.
way.
They've done different studies on that. So I would say like that space in general, whether it's my wife's company or another company. Obviously, I prefer if my wife's company is the one that makes these
Yeah.
inroads. But anyone who is
In the
working in that
education
space,
space.
yeah,
Well,
super excited
plug
about
the
that.
company. What's the name of the company? I'll have to check it out.
It's called MindJoy.
Mind
You just go to mindjoy.com.
Mindjoy. That's awesome. And not to plug a potential competitor, but I don't know if you've seen it before. I was looking into and saw a company in this space called Magic School. If you've heard of
Yeah,
it.
direct competitor
Exactly.
to our
And I
company.
was super impressed by it, and it's unbelievable. They've raised, I don't know, $15 million. I don't know what the revenues are.
They raised another, I think, 20 million recently, like the last week or so. So
Yeah, it
um,
seems amazing, and it only seems obvious that there's going to be these segmented AI models for education. And I think the more segmented and focused you are, is like K to 12 or high school or after school tutoring for math or languages or whatever. Like there's so much benefit in having a niche and focusing on the education system. Luckily, it's a massive industry. And if your wife wants to speak after this, my career started in ed tech. So I know it very well, and the trials and tribulations that come with it and how to break in the door. But yeah, it's going to be part of education moving forward, and it already is. But it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
Nice. I'm very cautious of any kind of AI startup that would potentially touch ChatGPT or Grok or I don't know, whatever Gemini is called these days, whatever the Gemini chat is. Any of those, that feels like suicide if you're going into that space. But as you said, I think if you pick a really specific niche, I think, ChatGPT is not going to go that deep
Yeah.
into specifics of what happens in the
Yeah. Oh,
classroom,
you're
right?
saying
That's
like
just
any
not
startups that want to
not not
compete with
feasible.
ChatGPT or Grok, like that, you're just staying away from those ones who are trying to go.
Yeah, exactly. You got to pick a niche. And I actually think most of the really good opportunities are probably really boring things. I think everyone picks the sexy ones first, to go after them. But where I would say is the highest probability of success is probably doing like incredibly boring enterprise use cases where you're, providing a co-pilot for some absolutely mundane job, or some kind of agent or something that can automate some weird back office
Yeah,
role.
it'll be interesting. I agree with that. Is like these AI wrappers that everyone calls in this industry, like they are clearly legitimate businesses and they're going to be successful as they can sort of plug and play LLMs in the background to provide the best results. But I think the more specific of a use case you do is the better. And it seems like the big, at least in my world, because I come from a sales background, it seems like the big problem everyone's trying to solve is like AI SDRs, where you're doing business
Yeah.
development and cold calling and cold emailing. And I've probably had demos from like 6 or 7 of them. Really not impressed with any of them. One, in terms of like their execution and what they're doing, I really don't think it's of quality. But also surprisingly, their pricing model is they're pricing the software at a cheaper price than an SDR. They're saying, hey, if you're going to pay an SDR 60K, pay us 3,000 a month, so 36, and we'll save you half the price of an SDR. But the way that I envision that space going is it's actually not going to be a replacement of an SDR. It's going to be an enabler of the SDR. And they're going to help you create better prospecting lists. They're going to help you create better scripts and better emails. Like I know if a AI bot called me, I would hang up. So I don't know how that's going to play out, but my foresight would say it's going to be more of an enablement than a replacement. But I completely agree with you in terms of niching down. It can be something super simple. One of the ideas that I had, I don't know if there's anyone out there, is obviously starting this channel. I have an editor, I'm working with them, and they're great at editing and stuff like that. But it seems very simple. Why can't my thumbnails be automated? I have a relatively structured format and branding and color scheme and images. There should be like a simple AI tool where I just type in what I want, upload an image and it creates a thumbnail for me, or it creates 5 different thumbnails for me.
That exists. I don't know like which platforms you're talking about, but certainly I know this for my tiny YouTube channel. I've found some tools that do exactly this, specifically designed to generate YouTube
I love it.
thumbnails.
Well, you have to send it over to me after, but yeah, the
Cool,
more
dude.
niche it gets, the better. So I guess staying on the topic of AI, which seems to obviously be the most popular, I'd love to hear from you and other founders. Like, what are you leveraging AI for today in your personal life or your business life or OfferZen? Like, what are some tactical ways that you've seen it beneficial?
So I am AI pulled fully. So I am fully on the AI train. So take whatever I say with with a
This
pinch
is
of
like
salt.
early crypto days
So
when
I
you
would
talk to someone about Bitcoin and they would just go off the rails and they're fully in. So we'll take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, as you said.
yeah. So look, I have a lot of different AI accounts, but I would say the tool that I use the most is something called Super Whisper. It's a Mac app, so there's probably a Windows equivalent of this, but essentially I have a keyboard shortcut and then I press it and I speak and it transcribes what I say. And that sounds really simple. There's lots of transcription tools already. In fact, there's one built in on Mac OS in general. But this one's actually really, really, really good. So I tend to most of what let's say I send you an email or something like that, I spoke it as opposed to typed it. So I would say, maybe 70% of all my typed, or all the words that come from me are actually spoken. So I think that tool is absolutely amazing. It increases your productivity hugely. And then one other thing that's really cool about it is you can change it to different modes. So the default mode is essentially a direct transcription of what you said, but then you can also send what you said through an LLM. And so you can basically have different modes and there's a prompt that you write. So for example, let's say I'm replying to an email from you, I'd switch it to email mode and then I'd say like, hey Dan, whatever, and then I narrate the email and then it would clean it up. It would make sure that it's a nice structure. It says, kind regards or whatever thing I want to say at the end. And that is just massively efficient. So instead of email being this painful experience, I'm just chatting away, basically chatting to you or someone else just emailed me. And yeah, it turns email into, I wouldn't say a great experience, but a decent
Yeah. So
experience.
it's more about efficiency and saving time by using voice to text.
Yeah.
It's interesting. My friends hate me because I don't know if you do this, but I'm a voice to text guy on my phone. I'm talking my phone, writing things out, whether I got one hand or whatever I'm doing. It's just much quicker. You can tell when I'm doing it because there's a little bit of spell check and errors that come through, but I find it to be much more efficient. But I don't do it on my computer, so I might have to check that out.
Yeah. Check out a Super Whisper. And then the other thing I spend a lot of time doing is I use Cursor, which is the kind of the current hot AI code
Yeah.
editor. And that is just the agent on Cursor is absolutely amazing. It depends on the use case, but I would say that it's for maybe at least doubles productivity if you're using it correctly. And then for someone like me who didn't code for a number of years, I was running a business instead of coding. Maybe for me it's a 10x increase in productivity because I can now use languages, frameworks that I actually don't know, and because I have general competence and general understanding of software development, I can do so much more. And I host this meetup where we have CTOs and tech leaders, product leaders, things like that, and it's very interesting to see how many of them have got back into coding because of Cursor and these different AI tools, because it's just changed it from, okay, I have an hour gap, what I'm going to do, to suddenly being able to code again and do so much within the space of that hour. And I think as you said, it's not a replacement for software engineers. It's a multiplier. It just makes you much more
Yeah,
efficient.
and someone who doesn't come from coding, I've never written a line of code in my life. Maybe in grade 7 in computer science class, I had to write something. I signed up for a Cursor account and I started to play around with it, and it really blew my mind. And the one thing that I thought was super interesting is like when you give it prompts, you can see it writing the code in real time, which I thought is a really great UI of it. Instead of just giving it a code and then giving out the result, you can actually see it writing the code. I don't know what the hell that shit is. Like, it looks like Chinese to me, but for someone who comes from that world and that experience, like, you can see it happen edit it, update it, but even learn from it as well if it's a better coder than you. So as you said, it's a multiplier, which is awesome. And I'm interested to get your take on it. With your dev team at OfferZen, do you encourage them? Do you mandate them? Like, what is their use of things like Cursor and other dev tools?
So we stop short of mandating, but we heavily encourage use of tools like Cursor. So not everyone uses Cursor. So look, there are alternatives to Cursor. So I personally think I've used pretty much all the main ones. I think Cursor is the best, but there are some reasons why you would potentially want to use, let's say, GitHub Copilot or some of the others. So yeah, we don't mandate a specific tool, but we spend a lot of time trying to get the team to adopt AI. And you would think that software engineers, would be the first adopters for AI tools. And, we do these massive surveys across South Africa every year, 4,000 or so developers partake. So that's by far the biggest surveys of its kind. And, 40 or 50% of software engineers are not using these tools in their day-to-day work, which is crazy to me, right? Like not at all. This is not just like some usage where they, this is zero usage. So that just blows my mind. People missing out. In our team, that's not really the case. Everyone is using it. We have the true believers, the Cursor guys that would, like me would be punting it. And then we have some, I want to say, slightly more casual users.
And well, do you know why that is? Why most people aren't using AI?
I think a couple of reasons. I think the elephant in the room is fear, right? So some of them are just scared that this is a job replacement, which I don't think it is, but maybe just alienation. I showed one engineer the other day my workflow in Cursor, and he said, "Oh my God, I can't believe I spent 4 years studying computer science. You've just done what would have taken me several hours in 10-minute demo as you're just actually showing me the app," which I think if you're a, let's say, like expert level user of Cursor, it is very, very scary watching that. And you almost feel like there has to be a cheat. So I think there's a bit of disbelief. But I think the main reason probably is just the tools were not very good a while back. And so people don't understand how much better these tools have gotten over the last year. So they maybe tried it, let's say in June last year, and then they're going, yeah, it was okay, it was fine, but like, it's not quite worth it. But, Cursor Agent only rolled out in, I think, November last year. And in the space of, the 3 or 4 months that have passed since it rolled out, it has gotten tremendously better. So you almost have to constantly be up to date with these tools in order to know what actually is working, what isn't.
Yeah, it's, I think my take on it is, one, I think you're right about the improvements. And the one that comes to mind for me is Dolly. Is like when I used Dolly first to create images, it was like, okay, cool, like nothing special. And then they had a new release and Dolly 2 and all these things. And it was like, holy shit, like this is going really quick and it's only going to get quicker. But I think the adoption issue is actually, doesn't matter if it's dev, salesperson, founders, marketing, people don't like change. And it doesn't matter who you are and what you do. Like people like the comfort of what they do and they don't like trying new things. They don't like evolving. They don't need like new processes. And I think it's just human nature that people are scared of change and don't go out of their way to change. And I think that's what creates A players and that's what creates founders, is like those people who seek change and seek learning and adjustments and improvement. Is the 30%, 40% or whatever of your survey that said they do use AI, and the 60% that don't are just lazy and they just don't want to push themselves and get better or try new things.
I think that, I guess the potentially, Sam and Elon and everybody saying AGI is very, very close. Potentially we achieve AGI and it isn't the event that everyone kind of hypothesized of the whole world changes overnight. Potentially you're right. And despite achieving this sort of miraculous point, the world actually still takes 5 or 10 years to actually kind of integrate this amazing achievement.
Yeah, and it will take a while. And the way that I think about it is, you think about all the industries that were hit with it first, and maybe it's not the right terminology, but like warehouses. There used to be warehouse workers that move everything around. Now there's robots that move everything around. The self-driving cars, taxis everywhere. Now Waymo's getting rolled out in different states. So I think there's an evolution. It doesn't happen. It's not snap your fingers and things change, but every industry eventually is going to be affected by it. And I would rather try to adopt than get run over by it, is my partake in it, because it's coming. Just like everything changes. And if you embrace the change and try to evolve with it, you'll be better off. If you just stay the way you are, like you're going to get run over.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I think now is the best time in history to be a founder because you have so much more leverage than you previously had. You can get so much further with fewer resources. Yeah, I think it's super,
Yeah,
super
and Cursor is a
exciting.
perfect example of that. Cursor, I think, is the fastest or one of the fastest grow 0 to 100 million ARR businesses. They did it in 12 months or something insane like that. And to your point, they could have only done that with the technology we have today, the distribution that we have today, and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy to see it. I'm sure something else will come up and crush its speed and do 100 million ARR in 1 month,
Sure.
but who knows where it's going to go. Shifting gears a little bit, and sort of going back to the OfferZen side of things, I'm in Canada. I work with a ton of Canadian clients. I work with a ton of American clients. We recruit a ton of talent from South Africa. You're the South African in the room. I'd love to hear your take on the evolution and the sort of the vision of the tech community in South Africa, how it's changed over the past 10 years, where it's going, how you see it evolving.
Yeah, so when we started the venture studio, which was, I want to say 2010, 2011, that was the startup ecosystem in South Africa was very nascent, right? There was basically zero competition. So we basically, any idea we had, we could launch a product to essentially zero competition. And assuming good execution, you could do pretty well, which, that was amazing. The golden age of venture studio. And obviously that has a very big impact on the talent, right? So it's just what is actually happening in the talent space. There was not a lot. So yes, we obviously had a ton of technology businesses, but we didn't really have a startup ecosystem at that time. That's changed a lot over the last 10 or 15 years since then. So I think Cape Town specifically is, it's a proper startup ecosystem at this point. Have you been to South Africa, man?
I've been, so my family is originally from not Cape Town, but a small town outside of Cape Town called Worcester. So yeah, I haven't been a long time. I got little kids at home, but yes, I've been to South Africa, mostly in Cape Town and along the coast there.
Yeah, so you should come. I'll show you around. But I would say is right now we have a really, really solid startup ecosystem in Cape Town, and then we have the talent to go along with it as well. So maybe talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of hiring in South Africa. So if you're building a company here, let's imagine you were just trying to hire everybody from South Africa, and let's say you're a Canadian company, you're thinking like, okay, the cost advantage is so compelling, potentially I just build my whole team in Cape Town. I would say that it would work for some roles and not so well for others. So specifically, I think the executive roles you would struggle with. So where we still are weak is scaling businesses, right? So getting businesses off the ground. I think we have people that have really good ideas. I think they're able to validate those ideas, build them out, build a product that's very, very compelling. The challenge is that we don't have people who know how to scale it. We don't have venture capitalists that know how to basically accelerate companies. Where if you compare that to Silicon Valley, we potentially have the caliber of founders and the caliber of engineering teams and everything else in that you could scale that business, but we don't have the knowledge or the funding available to do that. And so if you're building out a team in South Africa, which I've done several times, hiring your executive team is incredibly difficult here because you're essentially hiring people that are figuring it out for the first time, as opposed to getting a VC on board or a executive on board that's just done it 3 times already or twice already, and they got the playbook, and you're essentially just slotting in. Whereas I think for individual contributor roles, we and even just manager level, we have massive amount of talent. It's very, very cost effective, and we tend to work incredibly hard. We tend to be very resilient. We have our own local challenges here. So people in South Africa tend to be incredibly resilient. We have a great sense of humor. So yeah, I love South Africans and working with South Africans.
I have to echo the talent side of it. And from our side, like we've staffed people everywhere from like executive assistants to SDRs to all the way of heads of marketing. So we definitely been successful in some of those senior roles, but I think you are correct that it's more of a limited talent pool, but from manager level, director level, even below, like individual contributors, the talent's incredible. And I think a big part for South Africa, or at least what I see, is you have to see someone who's gone down that path in the past. And for Canadians, like the way that we view it is we're tiny and pretty irrelevant when it comes to the global business world. But our neighbors in the US, we see it all the time. These big companies are growing like crazy, and it sort of gives you maybe not proof, but a playbook that it can be done. And then some great Canadian companies like Shopify and stuff like that. I think it gives a lot of investors and founders and people who want to be entrepreneurs the proof that it can be done. There are great South African companies like Yoko, which is a huge financial, it's like the Stripe of South Africa. Like they're growing like crazy and building a great business. But I think more and more of those companies that roll out give social proof to the rest of South Africa that like, hey, we can build a great big company and we can be $1 billion exit or whatever it may be. Elon's a great representation of South African talent.
Yeah, I know he's a controversial guy, but I would say South African founders
Yeah,
love
South
him almost
Africans, period.
universally.
Doesn't matter about founders. Everyone loves them.
Yeah.
So my uncle is South African, and all he does is talk about Elon and praise him for the good and for the bad. So I think the more people that do that, the better it'll be for the country and the ecosystem, because you have to know that it can be done and see people who've paved that path before you.
And I want to add something here is I think what our business does and what your business does, I think adds quite a bit of value to the local ecosystem. So I think some people would criticize what we do, which, they would say it's the brain drain essentially, which is, we're taking all these talented people and letting them work on, a US startup or a Canadian startup or a UK startup. But the way I think about it is that you now have someone getting exposure to a market that they otherwise wouldn't. They're getting exposed to really high quality talent. They're getting exposed to just a whole world and potentially just learning about startups and top tier startups and how they operate. And I think that eventually funnels back into our local ecosystem. Maybe not everybody, but some of them go on to start businesses or go on to join a local South African company after they've, been with one of your clients for a couple of years. And I think that is a massive net positive.
Yeah, 100%. And hey, I was an employee before, and you learn through that, and then you launch a business, or you go and start another company, or you support another company and grow from there. So yeah, that exposure is huge. Another side, which we haven't even spoken about, is in South Africa. Unfortunately, the honest truth is that it has the highest educated youth unemployment rate in the world. For people under the age of 35 with a university or college degree, I think it was 44% unemployment rate. So the economy and the job market is just not great, but the talent is there from education perspective and experience perspective and hustle perspective for sure. So if we can be matchmakers of incredible talent in South Africa with amazing companies and opportunities outside of South Africa, it's a net benefit for everyone. The North American or UK based businesses get great talent. South Africans get great jobs that bring money back into the economy, but also improve their skill sets in the economy as well. So there's a bunch of different ways you can spin it. I like to spin it in a positive light, but I think it's a net positive across the board.
100%. Yeah. And just giving people opportunities. I don't see how that's ever a bad thing.
100%. That's a big thing for me. And so from an OfferZen perspective, you've been at it for 10 years. One thing that I'm very fascinated with as I'm at an earlier stage in my business is brand development. And you've done an amazing job of building a brand and creating a name for yourself. I'd love to know from you, what is your thought process or strategy of building a strong brand over time?
And we're talking specifically a business brand here, so OfferZen's
yeah. Well, I
brand.
guess that's a good point. I was talking about business brand and building that up, but I guess if you want to touch on base on a personal brand as well, I know you're become very vocal on social media and putting writing out there in the world. But yeah, let's talk business brand first.
Yeah, so I would say as OfferZen is universally known in South Africa by software engineers, and I wouldn't say universally liked. I don't think any brand is universally liked, but is loved by many. And so that was quite a conscious effort to get to that point. So for us, right at the start, we basically said, okay, so we want to be very community oriented, right? So we want to be, I want to say, the flag bearers for this group of people which previously didn't have a flag bearer, right? There was no place you could point to. There was no lighthouse where that people look to. And so we wanted to become that. And that started with a lot of grassroots efforts. It wasn't kind of making this big mission statement and trying to do PR or anything like that. We basically thought, okay, cool. Well, where do software engineers hang out? Okay, so they hang out on Twitter. They hang out on different, Slack groups, Discords. Yeah, I don't even know if Discord was around then, but various different online communities, and then they go to a lot of events. So what we then did is we were everywhere. We were at dozens of meetups. Like every evening, I was going to often multiple meetups. I was going to speaking at events. I was incredibly involved. So I think just like taking it over the top was one aspect. And then for us, one of the breakout successes in terms of establishing our brand was doing t-shirts, which sounds totally random. But we've given away tens of thousands of t-shirts. I think at this point, maybe 60,000 t-shirts that we've given away, which, to put that in perspective, South Africa only has about 125,000 software engineers. So that's a decent portion of South African software engineers have one of our t-shirts. And we put a massive amount of effort to design t-shirts that we knew software engineers would love and they would actually wear. So we weren't trying to be cheap. We spent, proper money getting really good, high quality t-shirts, and we didn't brand it very heavily. All we did is on the neck at the back, we put our logo. And then for the rest, we just said, like, we're going to get the thing that people will wear. And from a brand building perspective, that has been incredible for us. Okay, so one, because if you're sitting in an office and you walk past someone else in the dev team, you see, from behind, you see our logo, right? So that's already a huge thing. If you go to a conference and someone's wearing one of our t-shirts, you're sitting behind them, you see our logo. And it's almost, if you walk in public now and you see someone with our t-shirt, you know that they're a software engineer. So basically these t-shirts basically became a means of communicating you're part of a certain group when you're out in public, which, we didn't engineer all of this, to be clear. We didn't quite think of this at the start, but that's how it evolved. And yeah, so that was massively successful
that
for
is
us.
not what I thought you were going to say. Hustle and t-shirts. It's not the combination I thought you were going to go, but it makes a ton of sense. And I really like that idea because I think a lot of companies invest in merch and water bottles and coffee mugs and t-shirts or whatever it may be. And they sort of just press a button on Printify and it gets up and running. But I think you made something good. It's like, one, it's not about your brand. It's about creating a product that people are actually going to wear or represent. And if they do that, then you can get the distribution. And I actually like the idea. I'm closing my eyes and picture myself walking in an office and walk by the devs. Every dev sitting at their table with headphones on, and you see the little OfferZen logo on the back of their neck is a great marketing ploy. And it reminds me of a friend of mine. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Toolbox, and they're a software company focusing on the construction industry, and they're famous for their merch because they have this cool logo, and they go around to construction sites and they hand out coffees and hats and t-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff like that. And all the guys on the construction site love, well, first of all, everyone loves free shit. But the construction site guys love stuff, and if their stuff looks good and fits well and is warm or whatever it may be, they wear it on the site. And then when the supers or the CEO or the builders or the architects or whatever come to site, half their guys are wearing this logo, and they sort of have to be,
Yeah.
they have to understand what it is, or at least have a keen interest or awareness for it. Not the best strategy for everybody because it could be expensive and may not have that distribution. But I love the idea of creating, one, good merch that people are actually going to wear, but two, the one that acts as some sort of marketing, public marketing and exposure for your brand.
Mm. Yeah, so I think exactly. I think a mistake a lot of companies make is they just slap their logo on something and then think people want to wear that, and then maybe we'll sleep in that t-shirt, give it to someone else or give it to the kid or something like that. But you have to make it so basically our philosophy was that it has to be so good that people would be willing to pay a lot of money for this t-shirt, and then we don't sell it, so that if you're not at one of our events or you're not engaging with us, you can't get this t-shirt. And so people would literally tell us they attend certain conferences just to get a t-shirt because they know at that one conference we're going to have a specific t-shirt that's dedicated to that. Let's say it's a Ruby conference, then we would have a specific t-shirt.
Or you do like limited edition drops for each you guys are like, you're like Supreme
Exactly.
for devs. You do limited edition runs of T-shirts and stuff like that. That's awesome. And I think it's also a great insight of like, and you're very honest with it. Like, you didn't come up with this great insight from day one, but I guess you walk around a conference and you realize that people are wearing these shirts. It's like, oh shit, I think we might have something here. We should double down or continue to invest in this and do it over a long period of time.
Exactly. I would say the main inspiration came from I was sitting in a conference and this guy in front of me had a logo on the back of his t-shirt. And it was a terrible t-shirt, right? This wasn't good, but I just thought I've been sitting here for 2 hours and all I'm seeing is this bloody
Yeah.
logo. And I was like, oh right, that's a
Yeah,
great
exactly.
idea.
Turn every dev in South Africa to marketing and advertisement for you. No, that's super interesting. Hopefully, it's something I can put into my own business. As I've never really thought about that. It's a remote. Like, I work in my basement of my house, so it's very different when you're in person meeting with people. But getting out there in conferences is still a big part of business and growth. From your side of it, I'd love to sort of shift gears to the growth side of things. Obviously, you started with 0 clients. You've grown it to substantial brand presence, but also revenue presence from your side of it. What did you find was the biggest growth hack or sales strategy that you guys implemented at OfferZen to sort of hit that product market fit?
So I think a lot of this would be, I want to say, OfferZen specific and maybe even time specific. So obviously we run a marketplace, right? So we have the two sides of the marketplace. We've got the software engineers and we have companies. And when we were kind of scaling up, in 2016, 2017, 2018, so during that phase, what we realized was that if we just were really solid on one side of that marketplace, and that being the candidate side, the company side would just come to us. So all we needed to do was build a brand so strong among developers that companies would notice it. So someone in HR or the CTO would just know, okay, everyone in their team kind of loves OfferZen or knows about OfferZen. And so if we can just create that impression, then the companies would come. So I would say that for us was probably the best growth tactic, is just focusing on the candidate side. We literally spent zero money acquiring companies for the first few years of the business. We put no effort into it. We had no one caring about it. We just said, okay, just get the developers and create the impression in everyone's head that we are the software engineer guys. So yeah, that's pretty specific for us. I guess the general thing you could generalize a little bit, which is if you honestly understand your marketplace very well, you probably need to figure that out. I guess with Uber, it was pretty much just getting drivers was the most challenging thing, which they spent by far the most amount of time and resources figuring out how do they get more drivers. So I think for marketplaces, there typically is one side that's a lot easier, one side that's harder. And if you solve the hard side, the easy side often solves itself.
Yeah, it's a good point. And truthfully, I don't think about marketplaces that way. Like, when I picture a marketplace, I think about, as you said, it's two-sided and it's a scale. And your job is to try to like grow both sides at the same pace so they can support each other. But it's a good point that not all marketplaces sides are created equal. In Uber's case, as you mentioned, if you have a bunch of people requesting rides, obviously the drivers are going to come to fulfill those rides because they want to get the money. And in your case, if you have all the devs, then these companies don't have a choice but to come to you because you're the source that's going to make their lives easier to find all the right devs. So I think it's an interesting point of like, if you are in the marketplace business or thinking about starting the marketplace, try to understand which side is more valuable to the other and just go all in on that one side. And then the easier side or the not as valuable side will take care of itself. But yeah, it's a good point. And what's your take now looking in hindsight? You could have started a services business. You could have started a SaaS business. You could have started an e-commerce business, and you started a marketplace business. Where do you think marketplaces rank on maybe not excitement, but like easiness level of business? Where would you put it in that sort of stack ranking?
Geez, it's pretty damn hard. So a lot of the businesses we've started are marketplace businesses. So with the venture studio, so we're quite, I want to say is before OfferZen, we were very familiar with marketplaces already. But I definitely would say marketplaces are the hard.
Give me a 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10 for marketplace. 10 being hardest, 1 being the easiest.
I would say let's say hard tech is the hardest, right? So the Elon style companies, right, like a SpaceX type thing, those are 10. Let's put a 10 over 10 on those types of companies, right?
No,
like if
I
you
think
want to
everyone
make
can agree going to the moon is a 10 on the hardest.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's put it, let's relative to that, let's say a marketplace is a 7 and a SaaS business is maybe a 5. And a service is, again, depends on what, but maybe that's a 4 or a 3. Um, so it's definitely harder, but if you were to map out or the curve of hardness, it spikes at the start. It's very, very hard to get going, but once you get going, the marketplace does actually help you in some ways, and then the easiness decreases again. But if you know, like let's say you and I were starting business from scratch, it certainly would be one of the hardest
Yeah,
choices,
I would run away from a
or like the
marketplace.
hardest paths to take.
Yeah, I would agree with your ranking. Maybe I'd put it like a 7.5 or an 8, but yeah, it's definitely a harder one. And the biggest variable is that sort of two-sided marketplace, right? Because you have two unknown variables or two variables you constantly have to think about. Where in SaaS, really you just have to build a product that people want and then just go get the demand for it. And the product stays stable, but the demand is the sort of variable piece. So the less variables you're dealing with, the easier the business. And no business is easy, but the more straightforward the business will be to be successful.
Yeah, and if you look at what's happened in the recruitment market over the last couple of years, it's changed so much. So, in 2021, software engineers were the most in-demand people in the world, right? So, what is the kind of skill set and capabilities we needed internally, right? We needed the means of acquiring that talent, right? That's the most important thing, right? Dealing with these people that are massively in demand, you need to be able to still get them on our platform, right? Now the market is completely shifted, right? The amount of VC funding that's going out, the amount of demand for software engineers has changed. What's far more important for our business is acquiring demand. So we had to change our product quite dramatically to work in this new paradigm. And you wouldn't necessarily have those kinds of things in a SaaS business, right? Maybe you would struggle a little bit to get sales when there's soft demand, but you wouldn't need to fundamentally kind of rejig everything in your business as the supply and demand equation
Yeah,
changes.
it's very true, and I think no business is easy, and no business stays the same forever. So you have to be able to adjust to different things. But you're a very brave man for starting multiple marketplace businesses. So it's a tough one. Maybe restaurants or something's like right above marketplaces, but not an easy thing.
Yeah, there are
Yeah,
9.
exactly.
It's going to space, and then
Yeah,
just below
exactly.
that is a
Quick serve
restaurant.
restaurants is right up there. No, that makes a ton of sense. And the other thing I wanted to touch base on, and if anyone looked at your profile, maybe even saw the links, you're a proficient reader, and you seem to become a proficient writer. You have a personal blog, you're posting on LinkedIn all the time, and I think you share some really great insights and takeaways. I'd love to hear from your perspective of like, what would you say to either someone who's thinking about starting their own company or a current early stage founder? What would be a couple of books that you think have had a huge impact on you that you would recommend someone picking up or at least reading the Cole's notes on?
There are a lot of really good business books, and I think a lot of people want to find that one book that's gonna just give them all the answers, which obviously that doesn't exist. And there's always what's the saying? It's like the only thing worse than someone who's read no books in their life is someone who's read one book. I think I tend to agree with that. It's, let's say you get startup founders that read Lean Startup and they go, okay, great, I'm gonna just fully embrace what Eric Ries has said. And look, the Lean Startup's a good book. It's it's pretty decent, but there are some flaws in how he thinks about it. So I've come to think that the most valuable books are not necessarily ones that are sharing tactics, the ones that are inspiring you or giving you mental models for thinking about the world and your day-to-day situations. So if you had asked me, let's say 5 years ago, maybe more than 5 years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, I would have probably given you a list of books with specific tactics and things. Now I would say, if I could only recommend one book, I would recommend something like maybe The Courage to Be Disliked, which is a book on Adlerian psychology. It's basically a sort of philosophy of the world. I think it's incredibly valuable as a leader to have a good philosophy, a good way of making sense of the world, being able to stick to your to your positions. Obviously, the name of the book kind of gives it away a little bit. The Courage to Be
Yeah.
Disliked. There's a sequel, The Courage to Be Happy, which is also very good.
I've never heard or read that book, so I might have to add it. I thought you were going to say the Elon book by Isaacson, but
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of biographies. That's a really good biography. I would say though that it's almost too recent, and I think it's a lot. It's worth reading, of course, but I wouldn't recommend that as the number one biography. Have you heard of a book called The Fish That Ate the Whale?
no, I haven't.
It's a very crazy, crazy story. The book is about a guy called Sam Zamuri. He's this Jewish Russian guy that went to America when he was pretty young. Started out working on pig farms and just doing like low level work. And then he built a empire based on bananas, which were fairly new in the United States at the time. And he owned a significant portion of Honduras during his peak. He was I want to say he was like the Elon Musk of the late 1800s, early 1900s, and not quite, but he's dealing with bananas. But it is unbelievable. At one point, he overthrows the government in Honduras in order to keep his business running. So the level of agency that he has is just, I mean, obviously it's over the top and ridiculous, right? The fact that someone actually overthrew an entire government. He organized a coup. He literally financed a coup so he could keep selling bananas at without getting also export taxes, basically. I mean, it's
Wow,
insane. Like it doesn't make
that's a
any
crazy
sense.
story. The
Um,
banana warlord. I've never heard of it. The fish
yeah,
that
this
ate
is
the
this is
whale. I'll have
this
to
is
check it out.
this is a totally real thing. And yeah, you can. There's documentaries in this. I didn't believe it when I read the book. I kept opening ChatGPT and going like, Did this actually happen?" And
That
yeah,
sounds like a
it
page
totally did
turner.
happen.
It doesn't even sound like a business book. It's more of a fiction book.
Yeah, but it is real, and I think for me, the value again from reading stories like that, or Walter Isaacson's Elon book, is just it's just the inspiration. It's this idea that you can think bigger, right? There's no limit to what you can actually do. Now, obviously, I don't think morally it's a necessarily good idea overthrowing government to to advance your business, but I think just we tend to think way too small. And obviously, Elon's a great example of somebody who thinks big, um, but he's very polarizing, and many people will struggle to relate to that. Whereas this book, you read it, it's in the distant past, and yeah, you can get a lot of inspiration for that in terms of thinking bigger.
Yeah, that's. I was just taking notes here. I'm gonna have to add them to the reading list. But I think you made a good point. It's like there's no one way or right way to think, and I think if you take little nuggets of information from each of them, and one of the books that I really liked, and also realized that I don't want to go for these $1 billion like super competitive markets, was the Everything Store, which is the book about Amazon. I don't know if you've read it. I
Yeah, I
forget
have.
it really just showed the vision of Bezos, the competitiveness, the like energy it took and creativeness it took to go out and build what Bezos built and what Amazon was. And I think those stories are so inspiring. You can take little things from it. But I also took the other part of it as like, I don't want to build an Amazon. Like, I don't want to be Bezos. I don't want to live that lifestyle and be that person. But there's little nuggets of information and inspiration that you can take that you can apply in your day-to-day life. But yeah, I'll have to add the banana god to my reading list. That's a pretty cool one.
I actually think what you just said, I think is super valuable. And the earlier you can realize what kind of person you are and what kind of founder you are, the better. I had a friend who he built a very successful company. They exited for almost $200 million. But he said that he had to get to a point where he realized, okay, so he's built this company with his friends, and he realized if he needs to grow, well, like I mean, he could have grown the business, and he said he didn't want to because that would involve firing all his friends and building a better executive team, and he just didn't want to do that. And I think the sooner you realize that, the better it is, because I think you can incur so much pain. Like, imagine he had done that and then realized, like, actually, I'm not enjoying this anymore at all. I've now done the financially optimal thing, but now I hate my life and I'm no longer having fun at work.
Yeah, it's a bad toss up, and for some people, they would rather have the financial success and build a monster and cut everyone out of their lives. For me personally, I want to have freedom and enjoy what I do every day. Like, I want to wake up, take my kids to school. I want to like enjoy what I'm doing, and I don't care to build $1 billion business. And as you said, I think it's interesting from an outsider's perspective as like, it's hard to figure out what you like or what world you want. But to your point, is like, it's better to know what game you want to play and what outcome you're trying to get than just sign up for business and figure it out on the way. Like, some people want to be that cutthroat killer, and some people want to build a lifestyle business and enjoy their lives. And I think if you can scratch your own itch, you're going to be successful. It doesn't always have to be monetary, which unfortunately that's what people like to talk about, and that's what gets the headlines is financial success. But there's different ways to think about success as a founder.
Yeah, just don't raise venture capital if you don't want to go big.
Yeah. And that's something that's also, I think that has to be like, a lot of founders need to be more educated on that. It's like, if you raise VC capital, you're on the VC treadmill for the most part, and you have to know what you're signing up for. But unfortunately, the headlines and the news articles and the TechCrunch articles are all about raising capital, which I think in the general public's view is perceived as good. But it's not always good. And I recently spoke to a founder, and we haven't spoken in a long time. They raised us a round, and I said, "How's business going?" This was like 2 years later. He says, "Everything's going good. We're going to raise another round of funding." I said, "Is that good?" And his answer was, "Things are good. We're going to raise money." My question was like, is that actually good? Does that mean you're growing? You guys ran out of money. You need to go get more. So it's interesting that people use that as a barometer of success, but sometimes it's a barometer of survival. And I think more people need to comprehend that raising capital and doing these things that get headlines aren't always what's going on underneath the hood.
But I think there's a lot of I want to say the forces push you towards doing that. So for example, we bootstrapped OfferZen for the first few years. So I think about 4 years we bootstrapped it, and the challenge that you have bootstrapping a business is that let's say you're trying to attract talent. There's no external validation on how good your company is, what the value of shares are. So if you're trying to recruit some executive, you're right, they're obviously interested in the equity part of the business, and how much are you worth, right? It's completely unclear. The media don't want to write about you because you haven't raised funding. So, are you even a legit startup? TechCrunch isn't going to write a story of, how Dan bootstrapped his business. That ain't going to happen. So I think there's a lot of forces conspiring to kind of push you in the easy direction, which is, just raise around and see how it goes.
Yeah. Did you feel those pressures? Is that why you guys raised capital and switched from bootstrapping to VC backed or venture
That's not
backed?
why we raised, but we certainly felt those pressures.
Yeah, it's interesting. My thought goes is 100%. I think that's how the general public perceives value, and even on paper. But alternatively, couldn't you just get like a financial audit, and someone who's accredited or whatever can go in and value your company, or you can share your P&L with potential hires so they can justify how beneficial or how valuable the company is? That's not the traditional route, but if you wanted to swim upstream, I think there potentially are other alternatives. But you're right, this sort of equity game is exciting and sexy to people, but maybe there's alternatives. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky because let's say someone doing a traditional valuation on a business would probably do it very different from what a venture capital firm would do. So I don't know. It's not an obvious thing that you can easily just say, oh well, we're going a different route. But you definitely could, right? Back to the point of the fish that ate the whale. There is always a way of doing anything. You just need to be creative enough.
I might need to get a poster of this guy on my wall for inspiration, and just keep him in the top of mind all the time.
Yeah, just finish reading the book first before you decide to put a post up. He did some crazy things to do.
Fair enough. No, I appreciate that. Well, if people want to connect with you, where's the best place to connect? Or should they check out your blog or OfferZen?
Yeah, probably just checking out my blog or adding me on LinkedIn. So my blog is just my name.com. And yeah, obviously my LinkedIn is the same. I don't think there are many people called Philip Joubert, but if you find other ones, just add OfferZen afterwards, and you'll find me.
Sounds good. I'll link them in the show notes. Well, good catching up. Excited to work on more deals together this year, hopefully. And I appreciate the chat. Always good to connect.
Nice. Thanks a lot for having me, Dan.
Thanks. Have a good one. We'll speak soon.
Cool. Bye.